financial acumen. He founded a bank, built ships, engaged in the transport business, and was one of the city's wealthiest men. When he became blind about 25 years before his death, he did not allow that disability to impede his activities. Called by John Churchill, a man made of sterner stuff, he continued to work and engage in Oswego's civic and social life. Inheriting that personal toughness was his great-granddaughter, Dorothy. The daughter of Luther Mott and Ruth Woolsey Johnson, Dorothy and her two siblings spent most of their early life in Washington, D.C., where their father was a member of Congress. After her father's unexpected death in 1923, it was revealed that he and Ruth had been living well beyond their means. He left an estate valued at roughly $5,000, and Ruth had to scramble to save herself and the children from poverty. Dorothy attended the public schools and subsequently graduated from Antioch College in Ohio. She then became a physical education teacher. In 1943, in the midst of World War II, while teaching at Wheaton College in Massachusetts, Dorothy decided to join the military. Many years later, she told a reporter she had been attracted by the glamour of the idea, but she also felt obligated to enlist since no one else in her family was serving. She took her basic training at Mount Holyoke College, and because she scored among the top 3 in her class, she was immediately promoted to first lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. She directed the training of more female Marine recruits at Camp Lejeune and later worked in the administrative center in San Francisco. By war's end, she had risen to the rank of major. She returned to Oswego to become Dean of Women at the college. And in 1956, she was hired to fill a new position, full-time Director of Admissions. George DeMass told me recently that Dorothy never let people forget she had been a Marine. And her self-discipline and can-do attitude were reflected in her activities throughout the city. She was a charter member of Fort Oswego DAR. She joined the Oswego County Historical Society and was its president in 1966 and 67. She worked tirelessly to improve the condition of the Richardson Bates House. She was a charter member of Zonta and served as the group's first president. She made church history in 1962 when she became the first woman to be elected to the vestry of Christ Episcopal Church. On a personal note, she took her niece, Bailey Mott, a polio survivor confined to a wheelchair, to school each day, thus affording her the opportunity for social stimulation and a good education. Bailey graduated from business school and worked in the Dowden-Harrington insurance office before her untimely death at the age of 39. Dorothy's greatest contribution to the community involved the long, arduous, and sometimes dangerous campaign to bring low-cost housing to Oswego in the form of Hamilton Homes and later Simeon DeWitt Apartments for senior citizens. She was harassed with threatening phone calls. She experienced overt hostility from landlords and endured opposition from the mayor, who tried to have her removed from the housing authority. Despite all that, she persevered, and Hamilton Homes became a reality. Something Dorothy said to her niece, Nancy Mott Frank, has stuck with me. When Nancy asked Dorothy how she felt about her trailblazing activities, she expected some wonderful, deep intellectual or philosophical reflection which had inspired her. Her aunt's response, I don't know, I never thought about it, I just did it. My last 2 noteworthy Oswego women were also associated with the college and made lasting contributions to that institution. Lida Scoville Penfield was born January 28, 1878, to Joel Penfield, a wealthy businessman in Oswego, and Cynthia Adelaide Taft. She grew up in comfortable surroundings and was able to afford an education at Boston University, where she obtained a bachelor's degree in 1894 and a master's degree in 1896. She initially taught at various schools in Boston and Philadelphia, then found employment at the YWCA in Cleveland, Ohio from 1905 to 1914. In September of 1914, she returned to Oswego, having been hired as the college librarian and assistant in the English department. Her starting salary was the princely sum of $1,100. For the next 25 years, Lyda enthusiastically immersed herself in campus life. She served as mother to Epsilon Chapter Ago Sorority and advisor to Sigma Rho Pi, the Women's Honorary Society. One of her contributions was writing the text for the annual torch ceremony, a tradition still observed today. As a descendant of 2 Revolutionary War soldiers, she qualified for membership in the DAR and served as regent of Fort Oswego in 1935. She authored a series of children's books dealing with local history, devoting the last one to Edward Austin Sheldon and the establishment of his Ragged School in 1848. One of her favorite groups was the College Women's Club, founded in 1916, for which Lyda served as the first president. In 1918, she represented the organization at a convention in Ithaca, and the college club formally became part of the American Association of University Women, a branch of which is still active in Oswego. Together with Harriet Stevens, Lyda broke the glass ceiling for membership in the Oswego County Historical Society. Her many scholarly contributions to the group's annual programs are still relevant today. In 1942, the Society dedicated its annual publication to her for her long and faithful service as a member and officer. Always interested in improving her teaching skills, Lyda enrolled in classes at the Normal School and graduated in 1919. A perennial scholar, she returned to Boston University, obtaining a doctorate in English literature in 1932, a rarity among women at the time. She replaced Carrie V. Cinnamon as chair of the English department that year and held the position until her retirement in 1940. Not one, but 2 libraries were named for her. And when she retired, the students dedicated the yearbook to her as a sign of their profound respect and affection. She was equally esteemed by her colleagues. Charles Wells, her successor as chair of the English department, observed, "She set a tone of culture that no one else can ever beat." Many of you may remember, in the audience, may remember my last noteworthy woman, Dr. Virginia L. Radley, a controversial and complicated woman whose pioneering efforts in higher education administration opened the door for scores of other women. Virginia Louise Radley was born in Marion, New York, and she once admitted she was so shy as a child that she clung to her mother's skirts whenever they went out. Somewhere along the line, that shyness disappeared and was replaced, according to some, with an ego as big as Montana. She graduated from Russell Sage College and began her long career in a public school in Aurora, New York, teaching English and public speaking. She was also the librarian, drama coach, and driver for the baseball and bowling teams. She called it Dewey's Learning by Doing. She subsequently earned several advanced degrees, including a doctorate in English literature from Syracuse University. She returned to Russell Sage College for several years as English professor and dean of students, then made nationwide news when Nazareth College in Rochester, New York, hired her as professor of English and college dean. The latter appointment was significant because she was the first layperson and non-Catholic to hold that position. In 1974, she arrived in Oswego after spending a year at SUNY Central to fill the new post of provost and executive vice president. In 1977, Dr. James Perdue, the college president, left Oswego for another position, and Radley became the de facto leader, while a massive search began to find a permanent replacement. After an extensive process fraught with controversy from many elements, the SUNY trustees appointed her the first female president of a SUNY college. She was an adept administrator, a skill she sorely needed during the early years of her administration, when she had to deal with seemingly endless budgetary crises and simultaneously with male faculty members who found it difficult to answer to a female boss. She had absolutely no qualms about publicly labeling her critics yahoos. She fearlessly lambasted the politicians in Albany, whose budgetary ideas were at odds with hers. Her greatest student-oriented accomplishments included tightening admission requirements, establishing the honors program, and increasing ethnic diversity. Her whole life for the 10 years she was president was dedicated to making the college at Oswego a star in the SUNY crown. President Radley was also a dedicated teacher-scholar with numerous books, articles, and reviews to her credit. I was amazed when I read the text of a speech she delivered for the American Industrial Arts Association. How many others could weave Wordsworth, Keats, and Milton into a text honestly honoring industrial arts teachers? After leaving the presidency, she remained in Oswego for several years, teaching English literature at the college. When she finally retired in 1993, a reporter asked her if she had any parting words. Perhaps he thought she was going to extol her trailblazing efforts or administrative successes. But instead, she thought a minute and then said, "I would like to tell my students that I have really enjoyed them." For her, teaching was always first and foremost in importance. Well, the evening hastens on, and I must end this presentation on Oswego City's noteworthy women. There are many others I might have included, such as Julia McNair Wright, an author with over 200 books to her name, Mary Austin Oliver, a nationally recognized artist, Elvira Rainier, MD, a pioneering physician and social activist. You will find their stories and many more in Noteworthy Women of Oswego County. Happy reading. I will entertain questions. I don't know how to answer them, but I'll entertain them. If anybody has anything to say. Overwhelmed, eh?
Well, it's just so hard to be raised as an okay person.
Say it, you're gonna have to speak up.
If you've lived your whole life and been treated as an equal person to the man across the, it's so hard for us to hear the history of what that was like for these people, where they weren't considered a human being. And one of my first questions whenever I hear that is, how did they think they got here? I mean, that's a pretty simple thing, and yet it apparently didn't matter anymore. But it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I saw a hand in the back. Yes.
Who was mayor when Ms. Mott was trying to get the public housing?
I don't remember offhand, but the name is in the book, so all you have to do is just look there. Yeah.
I'm thinking it's probably Cahill, but I'm
No, probably Bob Iles.
It doesn't sound familiar, but whoever it was.
What year was it?
You would ask me. I didn't memorize the book, I just wrote it. I can't remember the dates.
Early 50s or?
Early 50s, I thought you said.
Darlene, can you back up to the slide that has the keep going.
Constructed between
Here it is.
1954 and
There you go.
1962.
Okay, it was Bob Iles.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not smart, I just know how to Google.
Anybody else? Yes. Oops. Yes. I guess not. Yes.
Tell us about your methods of research and where you found all these
Okay,
interesting people.
that's a good question. Well, of course, I found some of them when I was researching Civil War. I found more of them when I was working on the Masons. Sometimes I would find a name quite by chance, like Helen Purviance. I was looking for somebody else, and I happened to see her name, and she was in the Salvation Army in Oswego. So I wrote it down and kept it for future reference. Arminella Devendorf was the wife of, what's his name? Henry Clay Devendorf, who was an officer in the 110th Regiment. And she was with them at Fort Jefferson when the Lincoln convicts arrived, and she wrote about that. And so that's how I got her name. Of course, Muriel Allerton is a pioneer in Fulton. I just collect names and start looking for things to go along with them. That's about the best I can, how can
Yeah, she'll do
explain.
that in the cemetery. She'll come across the headstone and think it looks pretty interesting. She'll write the name down, go home and look them up.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time in cemeteries. Hey, Darlene and another friend, Elaine DeLong, have learned a lot of Latin going with me into the cemeteries. I saw in a hand here.
What sources do you use for your research?
Oh, well, newspapers, encyclopedias, resources such as the books I wrote on 147th, 110th, and so on and so on. Newspapers are a great resource, and we are very fortunate to have FultonHistory.com that we can all use and learn a lot more than we might otherwise. Anybody? Yes?
Natalie, did you find information about the women who worked with the Orphan Society and the Ladies' Home? The ones who were the wives of the noted industrialists like Irwin and Wheeler and Tucker?
Yes, I
Did
did.
you find information about that?
Yes. In fact, I wanted to include them, but the book got to be so long that I couldn't do it. But it's still in the works, and you may be seeing more about that in the near future. And there's also the hospital board. Carrington McFarland's wife, Louise,
Right.
was instrumental in getting the hospital founded here in Oswego. So yes, those two I wanted to include, I just didn't have the room for them.
Volume 2.
Well, let me tell you about volume 2. I have been given many more names, so I contacted my editor and I said, Richard, people are saying we want volume 2, and do you do subsequent volumes? And he wrote back and said, well, we have to see how the sales are going. And I wrote back and said, they're selling very well in Oswego. But I don't know whether they go for such things as that. But anything is possible. Anybody else?
It's always amazing to me what happened when I was there, but I didn't know it or didn't recognize it. You know what I mean? I mean, I was born in 1943, and a lot of the things that I hear about history between that time and when I became an adult, and no clue what was going on.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's wonderful. to
I
have
know
things-
exactly what you're talking about. I went to school in Belleville, New York, Union Academy. Had no idea, and I was never told what the importance of Union Academy was. Well, right now I'm researching the 24th Regiment, and Company K of the 24th Regiment was recruited from Jefferson County, and most of them were either teachers or students at Union Academy. Why don't they teach us these things? How long would it have taken to do a session or two on local history of Belleville, New York? Because it was a thriving, booming place back in those days. Pretty quiet now. But that is true.
They were teaching us history of other places and nothing about where we live. I didn't know anything about what was going on at the fort in the Second World War, and I was alive then, but no clue. I lived on the west side, you know.
Oh, there you go. Here we go.
You know, I didn't know any of that was going on there at all
Yeah.
until, you know, about what, 10 to 15, 20 years ago, when I finally started recognizing the importance of that, you know.
Anybody else? Oh, come on, folks, you must have more questions. Mary Kay won't pay me if I. Get some more business here. Anybody else?
Well, I
Yes.
just had once an interesting anecdote about how difficult it was to find women's names.
Oh, yes, yes. When I started to work on the Home for the Homeless, which at first I thought was an orphanage, then I realized it was not. I found all of the names of the women in Churchill's landmarks, but they're all listed by their husband's name. And it took me forever to figure out who all these women were. And there's still one woman that I can't really identify. She was going by the name of Mrs. James Brown. Do you know how many men James Brown were living in Oswego in 1870? A lot. But that is a problem. Anybody else?
I have an interesting anecdote. I related to Emma and Marietta Adams, as you know. And it was interesting to me that I read, and I got more detail in your book, that my great-grandfather went into the Civil War because he needed the money.
That's right.
And the reason the doll business was well, after it started, they kept going and going and going because they needed to try to save the home because they were deeply in debt. And the reason that actually stopped, and the dolls were stopped being produced, was because of the pandemic, the first pandemic, about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember my great aunt telling me that story, that the dolls were produced, and you see that picture, they couldn't remove the dolls, and they couldn't sell the dolls, so they just had to stay there because the salesman couldn't come and get them. So I just thought the ideas of debt and pandemic, and I'm now 100 years or so later experiencing, there's a lot of debt, and people, worry about their financial life, and certainly we've all experienced a pandemic. Just personally, that was very interesting.
Quarantined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one other fact that I've seen in a letter that my grandfather wrote, my great-grandfather, is when they got mustered out in Syracuse, New York, he was in the 147, they ran home. They couldn't wait to even catch the train. They walked and ran home. So I just thought that was interesting that they were so excited to be home, they actually walked, and I've seen that in a letter that he wrote. So just an idea to think, somebody's walking.
Well, he was
to
actually
Syracuse.
mustered out at City Point.
City Point, Virginia.
Virginia.
But they went
Yes,
to Syracuse, sorry.
And they went to Syracuse to get home, yes. As fast as they possibly could go.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yes.
Anybody else? Well, thank you all for coming. I think Mary Kay has a few things.
Got it all.